The millionaire thought he knew his house well, until he heard the cries of babies coming from behind a locked door. When he broke it down, he found the young cleaning lady in despair, holding her children in her arms, unable to understand the reason for the punishment. He demanded an explanation from his wife, and what he discovered left him in shock. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The early morning sun filtered through the windows of the servants' quarters, casting a golden glow over the tiny makeshift nursery Emily Stevens had arranged in the corner of her room. At 26, she never imagined she'd be a single mother to 3-month-old twins, working as a live-in housekeeper for one of the wealthiest families in Greenwich, Connecticut. But here she was, gently rocking Lucas while Lily slept peacefully in her crib. "Just a few more minutes, little man," Emily whispered, her soft brown hair falling over her face as she placed a gentle kiss on her son's forehead. "Mommy has to start breakfast for the big house soon." The Huntington estate was everything the rumors claimed: 20 acres of perfectly manicured gardens, a swimming pool that rivaled those at 5-star resorts, and a main house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. When Emily had applied for the position 2 weeks ago, she never expected to get it. But Mrs. Reynolds, the elderly housekeeper, who'd been running the estate for decades, had seen something in her eyes, determination perhaps, or desperation. "The East Wing staff quarters have a small adjoining room," Mrs. Reynolds had told her during the interview. "Not much, but it could fit 2 cribs if you're careful with space." The woman's kindness had brought tears to Emily's eyes. After months of rejection from potential employers who didn't want the complication of an employee with newborn twins, someone was finally giving her a chance. Emily placed Lucas next to his sister and quickly changed into her uniform, a simple grey dress with a white apron. She checked her phone and smiled at a text from Sarah, her childhood friend who worked as a nurse at the Greenwich Public Health Centre. "How's day 14 in the mansion?" "Twins behaving. Call me on your break. Miss you." Sarah had been her rock through everything: the unexpected pregnancy, the father's abandonment, when he learned there were 2 babies instead of 1, the difficult birth, and the even more difficult weeks that followed. If it weren't for Sarah's medical knowledge and unwavering support, Emily didn't know how she would have survived those first chaotic months of motherhood. All good. Twins finally slept 5 hours straight. Minor miracle. "Break at 11, we'll call," she texted back. Emily tucked her phone into her pocket and gave one last glance at her sleeping children. Mrs. Reynolds had helped her arrange a baby monitor system that would alert her watch if the babies woke up. It wasn't ideal, but it worked, and Emily was grateful for small mercies. The main house was quiet as Emily made her way to the kitchen. At this hour, she knew she would be alone. Mrs. Reynolds had explained the routine. Mr. Huntington was usually gone before dawn, heading to his financial empire in Manhattan. Mrs. Huntington rarely emerged from her bedroom suite before 10. The household staff, gardener, cook, and Mrs. Reynolds herself, wouldn't arrive for another hour. This early morning solitude was Emily's favorite time. She could work in peace, meticulously cleaning the already spotless kitchen, preparing coffee for the programmable machine, and arranging fresh flowers from the garden in crystal vases throughout the house. Sometimes, she would pause at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Long Island Sound, taking a moment to absorb the beauty of a life so different from her own. Today, however, as she arranged white peonies in the dining room, she heard an unexpected sound: footsteps in the hallway. Emily froze. Mrs. Reynolds had been clear that she should make herself scarce whenever the family was present. "Good morning," a deep voice said from the doorway. Emily turned to find Jonathan Huntington standing there, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning light. At 40, he had the confident posture of a man accustomed to power, yet there was something almost gentle in his expression. His dark hair was flecked with silver at the temples, and he wore a casual button-down shirt with sleeves rolled up, a stark contrast to the formal suits she'd glimpsed him wearing when leaving for work. "Good morning, Mr. Huntington," Emily replied, eyes downcast as she'd been instructed. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were home. I'll finish this later." "Please, don't stop on my account," he said, his voice surprisingly warm. "Those look beautiful." Emily glanced up, momentarily caught off guard by the compliment. "Thank you, sir. I picked them fresh this morning." He stepped further into the room and Emily noticed he was holding a coffee mug. Mrs. Reynolds mentioned we have a new housekeeper. You're Emily, correct? Yes, sir. Emily Stevens, and you have children? He asked, his eyes showing genuine interest rather than the annoyance she'd come to expect from potential employers. Emily hesitated, uncertain how much Mrs. Reynolds had shared. Yes, sir, twins. They're 3 months old. Twins, he repeated, something like wonder crossing his face. Boy and girl. Yes, Lucas and Lily, she replied, surprised by his interest. A moment of silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable, before he nodded. Well, I won't keep you from your work, Emily. If you need anything for your children, please don't hesitate to ask Mrs. Reynolds. Thank you, Mr. Huntington. He turned to leave but paused in the doorway. The East Wing quarters can get cold at night. I'll have maintenance adjust the heating system for that section. Before Emily could respond, he was gone, leaving her with an odd feeling she couldn't quite place. No employer had ever shown such consideration before. By 11 o'clock, Emily had completed her morning tasks and slipped back to her quarters to check on the twins. Both were awake but content, kicking their little legs in the air as they lay in their cribs. After feeding and changing them, she settled into the single armchair with Lily in her arms, while Lucas played on a blanket at her feet. Sarah, you won't believe it, she said when her friend answered her call. I actually spoke with Mr. Huntington this morning, the elusive billionaire himself. I'm shocked, Sarah teased. What's he like? The nurses at the center always gossip about the Huntingtons. He was kind, Emily said, surprised by her own assessment. Asked about the twins. Even said he'd have maintenance adjust the heating for our quarters. Interesting, Sarah replied, her voice taking on a teasing tone. Is he as handsome as they say? That's what to Sarah. Emily laughed, feeling her cheeks warm. He's my employer, and he's married. To that Victoria woman, right? She came into the health center once. Let's just say she didn't make a great impression on the staff. Emily lowered her voice, though she knew no one could hear her. I haven't actually met her yet. Mrs. Reynolds says she rarely interacts with the household staff. Probably for the best, Sarah replied. Hey, I need to run. Emergency just came in. Call me tomorrow? Of course. Be safe. After ending the call, Emily gazed down at her babies. Lucas had her dark hair and olive skin, while Lily had somehow ended up with auburn curls that couldn't possibly have come from either parent. Both had the same deep blue eyes that still hadn't settled into their permanent color. We're going to be okay, she whispered to them. Mommy promises. The rest of the week fell into a routine. Emily would complete her morning duties while the twins slept, then return to check on them before moving on to the rest of the house. She rarely encountered the family, though occasionally she would spot Mr. Huntington working in his study late at night when she did her final rounds. He would acknowledge her with a nod or a small smile, but never initiated conversation again. Then, on Friday morning, Emily noticed something different in her quarters. The old drafty windows had been replaced with new energy-efficient ones. A small efficient space heater sat in the corner with a note, approved for safety, maintenance, and most surprising of all, 2 brand new plush blankets, one blue, one pink, lay folded at the foot of each crib. Emily touched the soft fabric, confusion washing over her. Mrs. Reynolds hadn't mentioned any of these changes. Could Mr. Huntington have ordered them? But why would he take such an interest in the comfort of a new employee and her children? That evening, as she was finishing her duties in the library, the answer came in an unexpected form. Mr. Huntington was sitting in a leather chair by the fireplace, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed some documents. The heating system in the East Wing has been adjusted, he said without looking up. Is it sufficient? Emily stood with her duster in hand, momentarily speechless. Yes, sir. More than sufficient. And the new windows and blankets. That was very generous. He finally glanced up, his expression unreadable. Children shouldn't be cold, Emily. It's a simple matter. Still, thank you. The twins are much more comfortable now. He nodded and returned to his papers, seemingly dismissing her. But as Emily turned to leave, she heard his voice again, softer this time. I never asked. How old are you, Emily? The question surprised her. 26, sir. And you're raising twins alone? Yes? She didn't elaborate, didn't explain about Mark's abandonment or her parents' disapproval or the months of struggling to find work. Mr. Huntington seemed to consider this, then nodded again. "You're doing an admirable job, both with your children and your work here." "Thank you, Mr. Huntington," Emily replied, a warmth spreading through her chest at the unexpected praise. That night, after the twins were asleep, Emily found herself staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of her employer's interest. It seemed genuine, almost paternal, certainly not inappropriate or threatening. But experience had taught her to be cautious, to question kindness that came without clear motivation. Little did she know that on the other side of the mansion, Jonathan Huntington was also awake, thinking about the young mother and her twins, feeling a strange connection he couldn't quite explain, and completely unaware of the storm that was brewing as his wife. Victoria lay beside him, her suspicions already taking root. Jonathan Huntington had always been a man of routine. Wake at 5, exercise for an hour, shower, dress, breakfast, black coffee, 2 eggs, whole grain toast, and be in his car by 7:30, heading to Manhattan. This schedule had served him well through building his hedge fund empire, through his divorce from his first wife, through the years of casual relationships that followed, and now through his second marriage to Victoria. But lately, that routine had been disrupted by thoughts of the young mother living in his East Wing. "You're distracted again?" Victoria said over dinner, her voice carrying that slight edge that had become more pronounced in recent months. At 35, Victoria Anderson Huntington was still strikingly beautiful. Tall, blonde, with the kind of poised elegance that came from generations of wealth. She'd been a successful interior designer when they met, though she'd given up her career after their wedding, claiming she wanted to focus on being a Huntington. "Just thinking about the Miller account," Jonathan lied, taking a sip of his wine. The truth was, he'd been thinking about the twins he'd glimpsed that morning. He'd risen earlier than usual and had been passing through the garden when he spotted Emily sitting on a bench in the early dawn light, a baby in each arm singing softly to them as they gazed up at her with complete adoration. The sight had stirred something in him, longing, perhaps, or regret. His first marriage had ended partly because of his reluctance to have children. He'd been too focused on building his business, too afraid of repeating his own father's emotional absence. When Victoria came into his life years later, she'd made it clear she had no interest in motherhood, which had seemed perfect at the time. Now, he wasn't so sure. "I was thinking," Victoria continued, setting down her fork with precision, "we should update the staff quarters. That section of the house hasn't been renovated since your parents owned it." Jonathan looked up, surprised by her sudden interest in a part of the house she never visited. "What did you have in mind?" "Nothing major. Just modernize it a bit. We could convert some of those small rooms into larger suites. There's really no need for so many individual staff rooms anymore." Jonathan immediately understood the implication. "We have adequate staff for a house this size, Victoria. Do we need a live-in housekeeper? Mrs. Reynolds manages everything perfectly well without living here." "Mrs. Reynolds has been asking to reduce her hours," Jonathan replied carefully. "Having Emily on the premises helps tremendously." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched slightly. "Emily? You're on a first-name basis with the help now?" "She has a name, Victoria." Jonathan's tone remained even, but there was a firmness to it that made his wife sit back slightly. "Of course," she said, smiling in that way that never quite reached her eyes. "I just find it interesting that you know so much about the staff arrangements. You've never shown much interest before." Jonathan chose not to respond to this, instead steering the conversation toward their upcoming charity gala. But Victoria's observation lingered in his mind. She was right. He had never paid much attention to household matters before. What had changed? The answer came to him later that night, as he worked in his study. Through the window, he could see Emily crossing the garden, returning to her quarters after completing her evening duties. There was something about her, a quiet dignity, a gentle resilience that he found himself admiring. In the 2 weeks since she'd arrived, the house felt different, warmer somehow despite the approaching winter. He'd noticed the small touches, fresh flowers in unexpected places, the faint scent of lemon and lavender that now permeated the rooms, the way the library books were arranged not just by author, but with small thought given to complementary titles. These weren't things Mrs. Reynolds, efficient as she was, had ever bothered with. Jonathan's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at his door. Mrs. Reynolds entered, carrying a stack of mail. "These arrived for you, Mr. Huntington." and I wanted to discuss the staff schedule for the holiday season. We're only 6 weeks away from Christmas." Jonathan nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. "How is our new housekeeper working out?" he asked casually. Mrs. Reynolds' expression softened. "Emily. She's a godsend, Mr. Huntington. Hardest worker I've seen in years. And so careful with everything, despite having those babies to care for. The children are well, thriving." Mrs. Reynolds nodded. "She's a wonderful mother. Does everything for those little ones. Sews their clothes, makes their baby food from scratch, reads to them even though they're too young to understand. Never complains even though I know she's exhausted." Jonathan felt something tighten in his chest. "Does she have family nearby?" "Support?" "Just that nurse friend who visits sometimes. The baby's father left when he found out there were twins. Her parents didn't approve of her keeping the children, wanted her to give them up." Mrs. Reynolds shook her head disapprovingly. "But she's managing. Keeps a notebook tracking every penny. Almost everything she earns goes to the babies." After Mrs. Reynolds left, Jonathan sat at his desk, turning this information over in his mind. He'd been raised with every advantage, never wanting for anything. The idea of a young mother struggling alone to provide for her children while maintaining such dignity stirred something protective in him. The next morning, Jonathan made a detour before heading to the office. The children's bookstore in downtown Greenwich was just opening when he arrived. He spent nearly an hour selecting a collection of classic children's stories, leather-bound and illustrated with the kind of artistry that could be passed down through generations. At the register, he hesitated before writing in the card. For Lucas and Lily, every great life begins with stories. A friend. That evening, he placed the package outside Emily's door and left before she could return from her duties. He told himself it was just a small kindness, nothing more. But as he returned to the main house, he realized Victoria was watching from their bedroom window, her silhouette still against the night. "Late meeting?" she asked when he entered the room. "Just wanted some air," he replied, loosening his tie. Victoria turned from the window, her silk robe flowing around her like water. "I saw you coming from the East Wing." Jonathan met her gaze steadily. "I was checking on the heating system. You mentioned it needed updating." "Did I?" Her voice was light, but her eyes were calculating. "How thoughtful of you to remember." The tension between them had been building for months, long before Emily arrived. Their marriage, once a passionate reunion after years apart, had cooled into something performative. Victoria played the role of devoted wife in public, while in private, she grew increasingly controlling, questioning his every decision, his every absence. Jonathan had once been deeply in love with her, or at least with the idea of her. They dated briefly in their 20s, a whirlwind romance that ended when his company began taking off and consuming all his time. She'd left him hurt and angry. When they reconnected 10 years later at a charity function, she seemed changed, more mature, more understanding of his commitments. The reconciliation and subsequent marriage had felt like rectifying an old mistake. Now, 3 years in, he was beginning to wonder if the mistake had been the marriage itself. "The Anderson Foundation called today," Victoria said, changing the subject abruptly. "They want you on their board." "Your father's foundation?" Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Henry Anderson had never approved of him, viewing Jonathan as new money, unworthy of his daughter despite his financial success. "Daddy's finally recognizing your influence," Victoria smiled, moving closer to straighten his collar in a gesture that once would have seemed affectionate, but now felt possessive. "I told them you'd be honored. You should have consulted me first." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "I thought you'd be pleased. This is what we've been working toward. Acceptance into the right circles. What you've been working toward, perhaps," Jonathan corrected gently, stepping away from her touch. Victoria's eyes hardened. "I see. And what exactly have you been working toward lately, Jonathan? Besides renovating the staff quarters?" Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant about an urgent situation with an overseas investment. Grateful for the interruption, Jonathan excused himself to his study, leaving Victoria standing alone, her expression shifting from anger to calculation. The next morning, Emily found the package outside her door. Her first instinct was caution. Unexpected gifts often came with expectations she wasn't willing to meet. But as she unwrapped the beautiful book collection while the twins napped, tears filled her eyes. She ran her fingers over the embossed covers, the heavy cream pages, the illustrations that seemed to leap from the pages with their vibrant colors. Who would give her children such a thoughtful gift? Mrs. Reynolds was kind but practical in her generosity. Extra formula, hand-me-down clothes, an occasional homemade casserole. This was different. This was the kind of gift that said not just, "I want to help," but "I see your children's future and it matters." Later that day, as Emily dusted the library shelves, she found herself studying Mr. Huntington as he worked at his desk. There was something different about him compared to the wealthy men she'd worked for in the past. Despite his obvious power and privilege, he lacked the dismissive arrogance she'd come to expect. Instead, there was a thoughtfulness to him, a quiet attention to detail that reminded her, oddly enough, of herself. "Is there something you need, Emily?" he asked, looking up to find her watching him. Emily blushed, embarrassed at being caught staring. "No, sir. I wanted to thank whoever left the beautiful books for my children. They're the kind of gift that lasts a lifetime." Jonathan's expression remained neutral, but Emily caught the slight softening around his eyes. "Perhaps someone wanted to make sure those children know they're valued," he said carefully. "They are," Emily replied with quiet certainty. "Every day in every way I can manage." Their eyes met for a moment too long, a current of understanding passing between them that had nothing to do with employer and employee. Emily was the first to look away, returning to her dusting with renewed focus. Neither noticed Victoria standing in the hallway, watching the exchange with narrowed eyes, her hand clutching the doorframe with white knuckles. That night, Victoria slipped into Jonathan's study after he'd gone to bed. She moved with purpose through the room, checking his desk calendar, flipping through the papers in his briefcase, scanning his recent emails. Nothing seemed unusual until she noticed a receipt tucked into his desk drawer from Heartwood Books for a children's collection worth more than Emily likely earned in a week. Victoria sat in Jonathan's chair, the receipt between her manicured fingers as memories flooded back. Jonathan leaving her for his work all those years ago, the humiliation of being discarded, the years she'd spent reconstructing herself, cultivating connections, refining her image, plotting her return to his life. She'd sworn then that if she ever got him back, she would never let him go again. And now this nothing of a girl with her inconvenient children was threatening everything Victoria had worked for. "Not again," she whispered to the empty room. Never again. Victoria Huntington had perfected the art of reinvention. Born to old money but raised by parents whose fortune was dwindling with each passing year, she had learned early that appearance was everything. When she first met Jonathan at 23, she had recognized his potential immediately, not just his growing wealth, but his intelligence, his drive, and most importantly, his lack of connection to the elite social circles she desperately wanted to maintain. He had been her ticket, her solution, until he'd chosen his work over her. The humiliation had been total. Her friends, the ones who mattered anyway, had whispered behind manicured hands, their sympathy thinly veiling their satisfaction at her failure. Victoria Anderson, always so confident, finally taken down a notch. Never again, she had promised herself back then, just as she whispered now in Jonathan's empty study. She had spent a decade rebuilding herself, cultivating the right connections, marrying and divorcing a tech entrepreneur whose stock options had left her comfortably wealthy, and finally orchestrating her chance reunion with Jonathan. By then, he was no longer the hungry young businessman with something to prove. He had become exactly what she'd predicted, powerful, respected, and still unmarried. Their reconciliation had been her masterpiece, calculated down to the vintage champagne she'd ordered at their reunion dinner. Now, standing in the wing that housed her husband's charity foundation offices, Victoria watched through the window as Emily crossed the garden with a twin in each arm, their little faces turned up to the weak November sunshine. "Mrs. Huntington, the board is ready for you," her assistant said, interrupting her thoughts. Victoria turned, her smile practiced and perfect. "Thank you, Melissa. I'll be right in." The Huntington Family Foundation had become Victoria's primary occupation since their marriage. Jonathan had been surprisingly willing to let her take the reins of the organization, perhaps seeing it as a way to keep her occupied while he focused on his business. Little did he know that Victoria saw it as her insurance policy, her way of cementing herself into every aspect of his life and legacy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began as she entered the boardroom, her voice carrying that perfect blend of warmth and authority. "Thank you for coming today. As you know, our annual Winter Gala is approaching, and this year, we've set an ambitious fundraising goal for our children's education initiatives." The irony wasn't lost on her. Championing educational opportunities for children while plotting against a mother and her twins. But Victoria had long ago mastered the art of compartmentalization. Her charity work was genuine in its way. It brought her the status and admiration she craved, and if children benefited along the way, all the better. As the meeting proceeded, Victoria found her thoughts drifting back to Emily Stevens. What did Jonathan see in her? She wasn't particularly beautiful. Pretty in a simple, unadorned way perhaps, but nothing special. She had no connections, no fortune, no sophisticated education. Just two illegitimate babies and a desperate need for employment. Perhaps that was it. Jonathan's savior complex emerging. He'd always had a weakness for the underdog, a trait Victoria had once found charming, but now saw as a potential threat. If it was just misplaced charity, she could manage it. But the way he'd looked at Emily in the library yesterday suggested something more concerning. Victoria recognized the signs. She'd seen them before in their first relationship, when his attention began to drift toward his business and away from her. That slight distraction in his eyes, the way he would pause before answering her questions, as if his mind had been elsewhere. Back then, she'd lost him to his ambition. She wouldn't lose him again, especially not to a housekeeper with baggage. "Victoria, your thoughts on the venue?" asked Eleanor Reynolds, a board member and wife of Greenwich's most prominent real estate developer. Victoria blinked, smoothly covering her momentary lapse. "I think the Greenwich Country Club is the obvious choice. Tradition has its place, but I'm open to suggestions if anyone feels strongly about an alternative." The meeting continued, and Victoria participated on autopilot, her mind working on a different problem entirely. By the time she returned to the main house, she had the beginnings of a plan. "Mrs. Huntington," Mrs. Reynolds greeted her in the foyer, "the florist called about your arrangements for the dinner party tomorrow. And Mr. Huntington asked me to tell you he'll be home late tonight, something about the Asian markets opening." Victoria nodded, removing her cashmere coat. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Is our new housekeeper working out? I've hardly seen her." Mrs. Reynolds's face brightened. "Oh, Emily's a treasure, ma'am. So thorough and quiet. You'd never know there were babies in the house. She keeps them so well behaved." "How fortunate," Victoria replied with a practiced smile. "I'd like to speak with her, actually. Perhaps you could send her to my sitting room when she's available." "Of course. She should be finishing the upstairs now." Victoria climbed the grand staircase to the master suite, her mind working through her approach. Direct confrontation wouldn't serve her purposes. Better to establish dominance subtly, to make it clear to Emily exactly where she stood in the household hierarchy. 30 minutes later, a soft knock came at the sitting room door. "Come in," Victoria called, arranging herself elegantly on the chaise lounge. Emily entered, her uniform immaculate despite a full day's work. "You wanted to see me, Mrs. Huntington?" Victoria studied her for a moment. The simple ponytail, the clear skin free of makeup, the watchful intelligence in her eyes. There was a quiet dignity to her that Victoria found irritating. "Yes, Emily, please sit down." Victoria gestured to a chair positioned lower than her own chaise, a subtle power play. "I realized we haven't had a chance to properly meet since you started working here." "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Huntington," Emily replied, sitting with her back straight, hands folded in her lap. "Everyone has been very kind." "I'm glad to hear it." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Reynolds speaks highly of you." "It must be challenging working full-time while caring for two infants." "It can be, but I'm grateful for the opportunity and the accommodations." Victoria nodded, her expression sympathetic. "Children are such a blessing, but also a tremendous responsibility. I've always admired women who can balance it all, especially single mothers." Emily's expression remained neutral, but Victoria caught the slight tension in her shoulders. Good. The reminder of her precarious situation had landed as intended. I understand my husband has taken a personal interest in your situation, Victoria continued. The heating, the windows, the blankets for the children. Jonathan has always had a soft spot for charitable causes. The implication was clear. You are a charity case, nothing more. Emily's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice remained steady. Mr. Huntington has been very kind. The improvements to the quarters benefit the house as much as us. Better insulation saves on heating costs. Victoria raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself at the diplomatic response. This girl wasn't as simple as she'd assumed. Of course, Jonathan is nothing if not practical. Victoria stood, signaling the end of the conversation. I just wanted to make sure you were settling in well. The Huntington household has certain standards, and I take a personal interest in making sure they're maintained. I understand. Mrs. Huntington, is there anything specific you'd like me to adjust about my work? The question was perfectly respectful, yet Victoria detected a subtle challenge in it. This girl wouldn't be easily intimidated, not at present. Just continue as you have been. Victoria moved to her desk and picked up a small silver frame. This was taken at our wedding. The happiest day of our lives. The photograph showed Victoria and Jonathan on the steps of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, surrounded by Greenwich's elite. Victoria looked radiant in custom Vera Wang, while Jonathan gazed at her with what appeared to be adoration, though she knew now it had been more relief that the elaborate ceremony was finally over. You make a beautiful couple, Emily said politely. Victoria replaced the frame carefully. We have a complicated history, Jonathan and I. We were together in our 20s, did you know that? His career came between us then. When we reunited years later, it was like the universe giving us a second chance. She turned back to Emily, her expression softening in a calculated way. There's nothing I wouldn't do to protect that second chance. The threat, veiled as it was, hung in the air between them. Emily stood, recognizing her dismissal. If there's nothing else, Mrs. Huntington, I should check on the twins. Of course. Victoria waved a hand dismissively. Family first, always. After Emily left, Victoria poured herself a glass of wine and walked to the window, watching as the young mother crossed the garden to the east wing. The conversation had been enlightening. Emily Stevens wasn't going to be scared off by vague intimidation. If Victoria wanted to neutralize this threat, she would need to be more direct. Later that evening, when Jonathan finally returned home, he found Victoria waiting for him in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth, 2 glasses of his favorite scotch poured and waiting. This is a nice surprise, he said, loosening his tie as he accepted the drink. I thought you might need it after such a long day, Victoria replied, her voice warm with practiced concern. The Asian markets must be challenging right now. Jonathan gave her a curious look. The Victoria rarely showed interest in his work, unless it involved social connections or charitable donations. Nothing I can't handle, he said, taking a seat across from her. How was your day? Productive. The gala planning is coming along nicely. Victoria sipped her scotch. I met with our new housekeeper today. Jonathan's expression remained neutral, but Victoria caught the slight pause before he responded. Oh, what did you think of her? She seems capable, though I do worry about her situation. Her situation? Victoria leaned forward, her expression a perfect mask of compassionate concern. A single mother with twins, Jonathan. No family support, from what Mrs. Reynolds tells me. Working as household staff, you have to admit it's rather Dickensian. Jonathan frowned. She's not a chimney sweep, Victoria. She's a professional housekeeper with fair compensation and decent accommodations. Of course, Victoria agreed smoothly. I just wonder if we're really helping her by keeping her here, isolated from the world, with only her children for company. Wouldn't she be better off with a job that allowed her to meet people, to build a future beyond service? That's for her to decide, isn't it? Jonathan replied, his tone cooling. She seems to value the stability this position provides. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. You're right, of course. I just worry about those children growing up in staff quarters. Children need space, friends, community. She was watching him carefully, gauging his reaction. The slight hardening around his eyes told her she'd struck a nerve, perhaps his own childhood memories of distant parents and staff raising him. If you're concerned about the children, Jonathan said after a moment, Perhaps we could convert one of the unused rooms on the ground floor into a proper nursery for them during the day. It was worse than Victoria had feared. He wasn't just feeling charitable toward Emily, he was actively investing in her presence, making space for her and her children in their home. What a lovely idea, Victoria lied, her mind already racing ahead to counter this development. You've always been so thoughtful, Jonathan. Later, as they prepared for bed, Victoria watched Jonathan through the bathroom mirror as he brushed his teeth. The distance between them had been growing for months, but now she felt it widening into a chasm. She needed to act quickly, decisively. That night, as Jonathan slept beside her, Victoria lay awake planning. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to reclaim her place in Jonathan's life. She wouldn't lose him again, especially not to a housekeeper with 2 fatherless children. Emily Stevens needed to go, and Victoria knew exactly how to make that happen. Across the estate, Emily also lay awake, the twins sleeping peacefully in their cribs beside her. Mrs. Huntington's veiled warnings echoed in her mind. In her previous positions, Emily had always maintained a careful distance from her employers, doing her job efficiently and invisibly. But something was different here. Mr. Huntington's kindness seemed genuine, not the condescending charity his wife had implied. Yet Emily knew better than to mistake an employer's kindness for anything more. She'd learned that lesson painfully with the twins' father, a man who'd made promises he never intended to keep. "We'll be okay," she whispered to her sleeping babies. "We always are." But as she finally drifted off to sleep, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the peaceful refuge she'd found at the Huntington estate was about to be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. December arrived with a blanket of snow that transformed the Huntington estate into a winter wonderland. Emily had been working at the mansion for nearly a month now, settling into a comfortable routine. The twins were thriving, growing more alert and engaged each day. Lucas had started reaching for objects with surprising coordination, while Lily had developed a bubbling laugh that never failed to brighten Emily's darkest moments. "They're developing beautifully," Sarah said during her weekly visit, bouncing Lily on her knee while Emily fed Lucas. "All their milestones are right on track, maybe even advanced." Emily smiled with tired pride. "They're starting to sleep longer stretches at night, thank goodness." And Mr. Huntington had that unused storage room converted into a proper nursery for them during the day. Having that extra space has been life-changing. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Huntington seems very accommodating." "He's been kind," Emily admitted, careful to keep her tone neutral. "But Mrs. Huntington, I don't think she's happy about the changes. She barely acknowledges me, and when she does, there's this underlying tension." "Rich people and their drama," Sarah shrugged, then lowered her voice. "Speaking of drama, guess who came into the health center yesterday? Victoria Huntington herself." Emily looked up, surprised. "What for?" "Nothing serious, just a prescription renewal." But she spent the entire time on her phone, talking loudly about some charity board member she's feuding with. Then she asked about our patient privacy policies. "That's odd. Why would she care about that?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "She specifically asked if we ever discussed our patients' medical histories with their employers. I think she was fishing for information about you, Em." A cold feeling settled in Emily's stomach. What did you tell her? "The truth, that patient confidentiality is absolute. But be careful, okay? Something about her didn't sit right with me." After Sarah left, Emily found herself moving through her afternoon tasks with heightened awareness. She'd felt Mrs. Huntington's gaze following her more frequently lately, evaluating, calculating. Initially, Emily had attributed it to a wealthy woman's natural suspicion of household staff. Now she wondered if there was more to it. That evening, as Emily polished the silver in the formal dining room, she overheard raised voices coming from Jonathan's study. She tried not to listen, but the words carried clearly through the old house. "It's a family heirloom, Victoria. Of course I noticed it was missing." Jonathan's voice was sharp with rare anger. "I'm simply saying we should consider all possibilities," Victoria replied, her tone managing to be both defensive and accusatory. "It was in the display case last week and now it's gone. Only household staff have access to that room. Are you seriously suggesting Mrs. Reynolds, who has worked for my family for 30 years, or our groundskeeper who never even enters the main house, would steal from us?" There was a pause, and Emily could almost feel Victoria's calculated hesitation. "Perhaps not them," she said finally. The implication was clear, and Emily felt her chest tighten with indignation. She had never stolen anything in her life, had built her entire existence around honest work and integrity. "That's absurd," Jonathan responded, his voice cold. "Emily has been nothing but exemplary since she arrived. Appearances can be deceiving, darling. A single mother desperate for money." "Enough, Victoria. The pocket watch is probably misplaced. I'll have the house searched properly tomorrow." Emily forced herself to continue polishing, her movements mechanical as her mind raced. What pocket watch were they talking about? She hadn't seen any such item, let alone touched it. The accusation, even second-hand, stung deeply. Later that night, after checking that the twins were asleep, Emily sat on the edge of her bed and called Sarah. "She's trying to frame me for theft," she whispered into the phone, the reality of her situation settling in. "I've never even seen this pocket watch they're talking about." "That's serious, Em," Sarah replied, her voice tense. "If they file a police report..." "I know." Emily closed her eyes. "I'd lose everything, my job, my references. No one would hire a housekeeper with a theft accusation. You need to talk to Mr. Huntington directly. He seems reasonable." "And say what? That I overheard them arguing and I'm not a thief. It would just make me look guilty." "Then document everything. Keep a record of your whereabouts, your duties. If she's setting you up, you need to protect yourself." Emily agreed, but after hanging up, a sense of helplessness washed over her. She was alone in a powerful family's home, her word against a wealthy socialite's. Even with Jonathan's apparent belief in her innocence, she was vulnerable. The next morning dawned grey and cold. Emily dressed the twins warmly and settled them in their daytime nursery with toys and soft music before beginning her work. The household seemed tense, with Mrs. Reynolds organizing a discreet search of the rooms while trying to appear as though she wasn't. Around midday, Emily was changing the sheets in one of the guest rooms when Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Emily, a word, please." Her tone was clipped, her expression severe. Emily straightened, bracing herself. "Yes, Mrs. Huntington? A valuable family heirloom is missing. My husband's grandfather's pocket watch, gold with intricate engraving and the Huntington crest. Have you seen it during your cleaning?" Emily met her gaze steadily. "No, Mrs. Huntington, I haven't seen anything like that." Victoria studied her face as if searching for signs of deception. "It was in the library display case. The case that you dust every day." "The display case was empty when I cleaned it yesterday," Emily replied truthfully. "I assumed Mr. Huntington had removed the items for safekeeping during the holiday decorating." Something flickered across Victoria's face, surprise perhaps at Emily's composed response. "Well, if you happen to find it, please bring it to me immediately." The emphasis on find wasn't subtle, and Emily felt her spine stiffen. "So of course, Mrs. Huntington." Victoria lingered a moment longer, then added, "My husband may be easily charmed by your situation, but I've seen your type before. The devoted single mother, struggling nobly against the odds." Her smile was cold. "Just remember that your position here is not as secure as you might think." With that, she turned and left, leaving Emily shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. The threat was no longer veiled, it was explicit. The remainder of the day passed in tense silence. Emily went about her duties methodically, hyper-aware of her every movement, every item she touched. When Mrs. Reynolds informed her that Mr. Huntington wanted to see her in his study at 5 o'clock, Emily's stomach knotted with dread. After checking on the twins and refreshing her appearance, Emily knocked on the study door precisely at 5. "Come in," Jonathan called. He was standing by the window, his expression troubled as he turned to face her. "Emily, thank you for coming. Please sit down." Emily perched on the edge of the chair, her back straight. "Is this about the missing watch, Mr. Huntington?" Jonathan sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Yes, I want to apologize for any discomfort this situation has caused you. I know my wife has concerns, but I want you to know that I do not share them." Relief washed over Emily, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you for saying so, sir. I can assure you I've never taken anything that doesn't belong to me." "I believe you," he said simply. "But the watch is still missing, and it's important to my family. It was my grandfather's. The last thing he gave me before he passed. The genuine emotion in his voice touched Emily. I understand. I'll keep an eye out for it during my cleaning. Jonathan nodded, then hesitated. There's something else. Victoria is hosting a dinner party tomorrow night for some foundation donors. She's suggested that you and the twins might be more comfortable spending the evening with your friend Sarah. All expenses paid, of course. Emily understood immediately. She was being removed from the house during an important social event. Whether from embarrassment at having staff with babies or fear that Emily might somehow disrupt the evening, Victoria wanted her gone. I see, Emily said, keeping her voice neutral. That won't be necessary. The twins and I will remain in our quarters. You won't even know we're here. Jonathan looked uncomfortable. It's not that we don't want you here, Emily. Victoria just thought, I understand perfectly, Mr. Huntington, Emily interrupted gently. But the twins don't do well with disruption to their routine, and I'd prefer to be available if anything should need attention during the party. After a moment, Jonathan nodded. Of course. It's your decision. As Emily stood to leave, he added, For what it's worth, I think you're doing an extraordinary job, both here and with your children. Thank you, sir, Emily offered a small smile. That means a great deal. The following day, Emily moved through the house like a ghost, efficiently preparing for the evening's party while remaining as invisible as possible. Victoria was everywhere, directing florists, caterers, and Mrs. Reynolds with military precision, barely acknowledging Emily except to issue curt instructions. By late afternoon, the house was transformed. Crystal sparkled, silver gleamed, and arrangements of white roses and evergreens adorned every surface. Emily completed her final tasks and retreated to the east wing as the first guests began to arrive. The twins were unusually fussy that evening, perhaps sensing their mother's tension. Emily had just managed to get them settled when she heard a sharp knock at her door. Opening it, she found Victoria standing there, impeccably dressed in a burgundy evening gown, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. We seem to have a small situation, Victoria said, her voice tight. The caterer is short-staffed, and we need someone to help serve drinks for the first hour. Mrs. Reynolds suggested you might be available, since you're here anyway. Emily hesitated, glancing back at the twins. They've just fallen asleep, but surely they'll be fine for an hour, Victoria cut in. Unless your assistance is too much to ask? The challenge was clear. Refuse and prove herself unhelpful and ungrateful. Accept and leave her children unattended. I'd be happy to help, Emily said evenly, if I could just use the baby monitor system. Of course, Victoria's smile was all teeth. Mrs. Reynolds will show you what to do. Black uniform, hair up, no jewelry. 20 minutes later, Emily was circulating through the crowded great room with a tray of champagne flutes. Her hair neatly pinned, the baby monitor clipped discreetly to her waistband. She moved efficiently between Greenwich's elite, offering drinks with a polite smile, all while keeping one ear tuned to any sound from the sleeping twins. Jonathan looked surprised when he first spotted her, his eyebrows drawing together in brief confusion before smoothing into his host's expression. Later, as she passed him, he murmured, You didn't have to do this. It's fine, Emily replied quietly. Happy to help. As the evening progressed, Emily became aware of Victoria watching her closely, especially when she interacted with the male guests. Several times she caught her employer frowning when a guest thanked Emily or made brief conversation. By the time her hour was up, Emily understood. Victoria hadn't needed extra help. She'd wanted to put Emily in her place, to remind her of her status as a servant. Relief washed over her when Mrs. Reynolds finally nodded, indicating she could go. Emily slipped away quietly, returning to the east wing where she found the twins still sleeping peacefully. She changed out of the serving uniform and into comfortable clothes, then sat by the window, watching the snow fall and listening to the distant sounds of laughter and music from the main house. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. How's the fancy party? Serving caviar to the 1%. Emily smiled faintly. Just champagne. Back with the twins now. All quiet. Good, remember what I said, document everything. That woman is up to something. Emily was about to respond when she heard a commotion from the main house. Raised voices, movement. Setting her phone down, she went to the window and saw lights coming on in rooms that had been dark. Something was happening. Her first thought was for the twins. She checked them again, still sleeping soundly, then hesitated. Should she go see if help was needed? Or would that be overstepping? Before she could decide, her door burst open without a knock. Victoria stood there, her perfect composure shattered, her face flushed with anger. "Where is it?" she demanded, her voice low but vibrating with fury. Emily stepped back, startled. "Where is what, Mrs. Huntington?" "Don't play innocent. The watch, Jonathan's grandfather's watch. It was found in the kitchen, in a drawer you accessed earlier today." The accusation hit Emily like a physical blow. "That's impossible." "I never—" "Save it," Victoria snapped, stepping into the room. "Do you know what's happening right now? Our guests are leaving. My husband's business associates, foundation donors, friends, all leaving because of the scene you've caused." "I haven't caused any scene," Emily protested, her voice rising despite her effort to stay calm. "I've been here with my children for the past hour. After you planted the watch in the kitchen," Victoria countered, "did you think we wouldn't find it? That you could somehow blame one of the catering staff?" Emily's mind raced. The watch had been found in the kitchen? In a drawer she had accessed? It didn't make sense unless someone had placed it there deliberately. Someone like Victoria. "I didn't take or hide any watch," Emily said firmly. "And I think you know that." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of something, Miss Stevens?" Before Emily could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway, and Jonathan appeared behind his wife, his expression thunderous. "Victoria, that's enough," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "This is not the time or place." "She stole from us, Jonathan," Victoria insisted, turning to him. "The watch was found in the kitchen where she—" "The watch was misplaced, not stolen," Jonathan corrected, his tone brooking no argument. "And this conversation can wait until morning. Our guests are leaving." Victoria's face contorted with frustration, but she complied, shooting Emily one last venomous look before stalking back down the hallway. Jonathan lingered in the doorway, his expression troubled. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said quietly. "Please, try to get some rest. We'll sort this out tomorrow." After he left, Emily sank onto her bed, hands trembling. The implications were clear. Victoria was setting her up, trying to frame her for theft. But why? What had Emily done to deserve such targeted malice? The answer came in a flash of understanding. Jonathan's attention. His kindness toward her and the twins. Victoria saw it as a threat, not just to her position in the household, but to her marriage. Emily looked at her sleeping children, their tiny faces peaceful and untroubled. She had come to the Huntington estate, seeking stability and safety for them. Instead, she had walked into an emotional battleground, caught between a resentful wife and an increasingly attentive husband. For the first time since arriving, Emily wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The morning after the disastrous dinner party dawned cold and grey. Emily had barely slept, her mind racing between indignation, fear, and calculation. By the time the twins woke for their early feeding, she had made a decision. She would leave the Huntington estate. No job was worth the humiliation and risk Victoria's vendetta presented. She cared for Lucas and Lily with extra tenderness, knowing their comfortable routine would soon be disrupted. "We'll be okay," she whispered as she dressed them in matching blue outfits. "We always land on our feet, don't we?" Emily was packing their few belongings when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Reynolds, her kind face lined with concern. "Mr. Huntington would like to see you in his study as soon as possible," the older woman said quietly. "I can watch the little ones for you." Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. I won't be long." The walk to the main house felt interminable. Emily steeled herself, rehearsing what she would say. She would be professional and dignified. She would not beg to keep her position, nor would she lash out at the injustice. She would simply explain that this arrangement was no longer tenable and request her final paycheck. Jonathan was standing by the window when she entered his study, much as he had been the previous evening. He turned at the sound of the door, and Emily was struck by how tired he looked, with dark circles under his eyes and new lines etched around his mouth. "Emily," he greeted her, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit down." "I prefer to stand if that's all right," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I won't take much of your time, Mr. Huntington. I've come to give my notice." The twins and I will be leaving today. Jonathan looked genuinely startled. Leaving? Because of last night? Because it's clear that my presence is causing tension in your household, Emily corrected carefully. I'm grateful for the opportunity you've provided, but I think it's best for everyone if we move on. Where will you go? He asked, his brow furrowing. My friend Sarah has offered her spare room until I find another position. This was a slight exaggeration. She hadn't yet asked Sarah, but she knew her friend would never turn her away. Jonathan moved from the window to his desk, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Emily, please sit down. I owe you an explanation and an apology. After a moment's hesitation, Emily took the offered chair, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. First, Jonathan began, I want to make it absolutely clear that I know you did not take my grandfather's watch. It was indeed misplaced by me. I removed it from the display case last week to have it serviced for Victoria's Christmas gift and forgot I'd placed it in my briefcase. It fell out in the kitchen yesterday when I was looking for some papers. Emily felt a surge of vindication, quickly followed by confusion. Then why did Mrs. Huntington accuse me of stealing it? Jonathan's expression darkened. Victoria jumped to conclusions. She saw the watch in the kitchen and immediately assumed the worst. He paused, choosing his words carefully. My wife can be protective of what she considers hers. It's a trait that stems from insecurity rather than malice. The diplomatic answer struck Emily as both generous and entirely insufficient. With respect, Mr. Huntington, your wife deliberately tried to frame me for theft. That goes beyond insecurity. Jonathan looked away and Emily could see the conflict in his face, loyalty to his wife warring with his sense of justice. You're right, he admitted finally. Victoria's behavior was inexcusable. I've spoken with her at length, and she understands there will be consequences if anything like this happens again. Emily almost laughed at the inadequacy of this response. Consequences? For a woman who had nearly destroyed her livelihood, her reputation, her ability to provide for her children, but she maintained her composure. I appreciate your honesty, she said carefully, but my decision stands. The twins and I will be leaving today. Jonathan stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. Please reconsider. What happened was wrong, deeply wrong, but running away isn't the answer. I'm not running away, Emily countered, a flash of anger breaking through her calm facade. I'm protecting my children and myself from a hostile environment. They deserve better than to live where their mother is treated with suspicion and contempt. Her words seemed to hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He stopped pacing and faced her directly. You're absolutely right, he said softly. They deserve better. You deserve better. And I'm asking you, pleading with you, to give me the chance to provide that. Not out of charity or pity, but because, he paused, seeming to search for words, because in the short time you've been here, you and those children have brought more life and purpose to this house than it's seen in years. Emily felt something shift in her chest, a softening she couldn't afford. Mr. Huntington. Jonathan, he corrected gently. Please, at least when we're speaking privately like this. Jonathan, she acknowledged, the name feeling strange on her tongue. Whatever your intentions, the reality is that your wife sees me as a threat. That's not going to change. Victoria and I have issues that predate your arrival, he admitted. Her behavior toward you is a symptom of deeper problems in our marriage. That's not your responsibility to fix, but please don't punish yourself or the twins because of our dysfunction. Emily hesitated, torn between self-preservation and the undeniable benefits this position provided for her children. The salary was generous, the accommodations safe and comfortable, and Jonathan himself had proven to be a fair-minded employer. What would change? She asked finally. If we stayed, what guarantee do I have that something like this won't happen again? Jonathan seemed to consider this carefully. Practical changes first. Victoria has agreed to keep her distance from the East Wing and your daily duties. Mrs. Reynolds will serve as intermediary for any household requests. Your position and accommodations will be formalized in a written contract with clear protections. These were reasonable measures, but Emily sensed there was more. And? She prompted. Jonathan met her gaze directly. And I want to be completely honest with you, Emily. My interest in you and the twins isn't merely that of an employer. I find myself drawn to your strength, your dignity, your devotion to your children. I admire you in a way I haven't admired anyone in a very long time." The confession hung in the air between them, its implications both thrilling and dangerous. Emily felt her cheeks warm, but she kept her expression neutral. "That's complicated," she said finally. "Extraordinarily so," Jonathan agreed with a rueful smile. "I'm not asking anything of you, Emily. I'm simply acknowledging what I suspect we've both felt developing. Whatever happens or doesn't happen between us, I want you and the twins to feel secure here." Emily stood, needing to move, to think. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Jonathan urged, "at least through the holidays. Give us a chance to make this right." The practical side of Emily, the side that had kept her and the twins fed and sheltered through the hardest months of her life, calculated swiftly. The winter job market would be bleak. Sarah's apartment was tiny and on the 3rd floor, with no elevator. Starting over would mean depleting her meager savings. And the twins were thriving here with space and warmth and stability. "Through the holidays," she agreed finally. "But I need something from you first." "Anything," Jonathan said, relief evident in his voice. Emily met his gaze steadily. "I need to know that you believe me, completely, without reservation, when I say I have never taken anything that doesn't belong to me. Not here, not anywhere." Jonathan moved around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small brass key. "This opens the safe in my closet," he said, placing it in her palm. "Inside is everything I value most. Family documents, my mother's jewelry, investment certificates. It's the only copy besides my own." He closed her fingers around the key. "That's how much I believe you, Emily." The weight of the key and the trust it represented was overwhelming. Emily stared at their joined hands, a lump forming in her throat. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll stay," Jonathan repeated softly. "Say you'll give us, all of us, another chance." Emily nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Jonathan squeezed her hand gently before releasing it, stepping back to restore the professional distance between them. "Thank you," he said simply. "We'll make the formal arrangements this afternoon. And Emily, I promise you won't regret this decision." When Emily returned to the East Wing, she found Mrs. Reynolds sitting between the twins' cribs, reading them a story from the beautiful book collection Jonathan had given them. The older woman looked up with obvious relief. "You're staying, then?" she asked, noting Emily's expression. "For now," Emily confirmed, lifting Lily from her crib. "Through the holidays, at least." Mrs. Reynolds nodded approvingly. "Good. This house needs you, whether they all know it yet or not." She lowered her voice. "And for what it's worth, I never believed you took that watch. Neither did Mr. Huntington." "Thank you," Emily said, touched by the housekeeper's loyalty. "That means a lot." After Mrs. Reynolds left, Emily sat with a twin in each arm, considering the decision she'd just made. The safe key was in her pocket, its presence both reassuring and terrifying. Jonathan had given her power she never asked for, trust she wasn't sure she wanted. What did it mean? And more importantly, what would Victoria do when she discovered this latest development? Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Status update? Do I need to come rescue you and the mini-monsters?" With one hand, Emily typed back, "Crisis averted for now. Staying through holidays. We'll explain everything soon." Sarah's response was immediate. "Whatever you decided, I've got your back. But keep your guard up, Em. Rich people play by different rules." Emily knew her friend was right. She'd entered a world of wealth and privilege, where people like Victoria wielded power as casually as they wore diamonds. But Emily had something Victoria lacked, the absolute clarity of a mother's purpose. She would do whatever necessary to protect her children and her integrity, no matter what obstacles the Huntingtons' troubled marriage placed in her path. Across the estate, Victoria Huntington stood at her bedroom window, watching as Jonathan crossed the garden toward his waiting car. Their morning confrontation had been brutal, his anger cold and precise as he dismantled her accusations against Emily, his disappointment evident in every word. Victoria had apologized, had promised to maintain her distance, had agreed to all his terms with outward humility, but inwardly she was seething. Jonathan had defended the housekeeper with a passion he hadn't shown for their marriage in years. He had threatened consequences, legal, financial, personal, if Victoria ever attempted to undermine Emily again. Most infuriatingly, He had insisted the young mother and her twins remain at the estate. Victoria's grip tightened on her coffee cup until her knuckles turned white. She had lost this battle, but the war was far from over. Emily Stevens might have Jonathan's protection for now, but Victoria had resources of her own, connections, wealth, and a lifetime of experience in getting what she wanted. If direct confrontation wouldn't work, she would simply need to be more subtle, more strategic. There were other ways to remove the young mother from their lives. Victoria just needed to find Emily's weakness and exploit it. As Jonathan's car disappeared down the long driveway, Victoria reached for her phone. She had calls to make, people to see, information to gather. Emily Stevens had a past, a history, perhaps even secrets. And Victoria was determined to uncover every last one of them. In the East Wing, unaware of the plans forming against her, Emily began her day's work with renewed purpose. She had made her choice to stay, to trust, to hope for better days ahead. Only time would tell if it was the right one. The twins cooed and giggled as she changed them, their innocent joy a reminder of why every struggle was worthwhile. "We're going to be okay," she promised them, as she had so many times before. But for the first time in months, Emily actually believed it might be true. December slipped into January with deceptive calm. Christmas at the Huntington estate had been a study in careful choreography. Jonathan and Victoria maintaining a polished facade of marital harmony for their social obligations, while Emily and the twins remained mostly in the East Wing, celebrating their own quiet holiday. Jonathan had been generous, perhaps too generous, Emily sometimes worried. The twins had received beautiful handcrafted wooden toys, delivered anonymously to their quarters on Christmas Eve. Emily herself had found a simple but elegant cashmere sweater wrapped in silver paper, with no note or explanation. She kept it in its box, uncertain whether accepting such a personal gift crossed boundaries better left intact. Victoria had departed for a spa retreat in Arizona the day after Christmas, ostensibly for rejuvenation, but more likely, Emily suspected, to avoid the tension that now permeated the household. Her absence brought a palpable relief, though Emily remained vigilant. Sarah's warnings echoed in her mind. Rich people play by different rules. On a crisp January morning, Emily was preparing the twins for their weekly checkup with Sarah at the health center when her phone buzzed with a text. "Can you come early? Need to talk before the appointment. Important." Emily frowned, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. Sarah wasn't one for dramatic summonses. "Everything okay?" she texted back. "Just come early. And maybe don't bring the twins if you can arrange it." Now genuinely concerned, Emily asked Mrs. Reynolds if she could watch Lucas and Lily for an hour before their appointment. The older woman agreed readily, always delighted to spend time with the babies who had become favorites among the household staff. The drive into Greenwich proper was tense, with Emily's mind racing through possibilities. Was Sarah ill? Had something happened at the health center? By the time she parked outside the modest brick building that housed the community health services, Emily's imagination had conjured a dozen scenarios, each worse than the last. Sarah was waiting by the staff entrance. Her nurse's scrubs rumpled as if she'd been on a long shift. Her expression was grim. "Thanks for coming early," she said, pulling Emily into a quick hug before ushering her inside and into an empty consultation room. "You're scaring me," Emily said once the door was closed. "What's going on?" Sarah ran a hand through her short red hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "Someone's been asking questions about you around town, specifically about the twins, your pregnancy, your background." Emily felt her blood run cold. "Victoria." "I don't know for sure," Sarah admitted. "But yesterday a woman came into the center, claiming to be from the Greenwich Social Services Department, asking to verify some details about one of our patients. You showed some official-looking but vague ID. When I pressed her for more specific credentials, she got flustered and left." "What kind of details was she looking for?" "Medical records from your pregnancy, birth certificates for the twins, your previous address history." Sarah's expression hardened. "I didn't tell her anything, obviously. Patient confidentiality isn't just ethics, it's federal law. But I'm worried, Em. This feels coordinated." Emily sank into a chair, processing this information. Victoria returned from Arizona 2 days ago. She's been unusually polite, almost smug. "I knew it couldn't last." "There's more," Sarah said reluctantly. Dr. Patel mentioned that someone's been calling his private office, claiming to be a previous employer of yours, asking if he'd verify some concerning information about your time working for them. But that's ridiculous, Emily protested. I've never worked for anyone who would say anything negative about me. And I've never even seen Dr. Patel professionally. He's a pediatrician. Exactly. It doesn't add up. Sarah sat across from Emily, taking her hands. I think someone's trying to create a false history for you. They're fishing for information, hoping to find something they can use, and when they can't, they're trying to plant doubts. Emily felt sick. She had been naive to think Victoria would simply accept defeat after the watch incident. Of course she would retaliate, just more carefully, more strategically. What do I do? Emily whispered. I can't fight this kind of invisible attack. I don't have the resources or connections. Sarah squeezed her hands. You document everything. Every strange call, every unusual visitor. And you tell Mr. Huntington, if he's as supportive as you say, he needs to know what his wife is doing. I can't prove it's her, Emily pointed out. Then we get proof, Sarah said firmly. I've already filed an incident report about the fake social worker. If she comes back, security has been instructed to politely detain her and call the police. She paused, looking Emily directly in the eye. And I think it's time I meet this Mr. Huntington myself. Bring him to the twins' checkup today. Sarah, I can't just invite my employer to a medical appointment. Why not? He's taken a special interest in your children, hasn't he? And I need to see this man for myself. Determine if he's truly on your side or just playing both ends against the middle. Emily hesitated, torn between her instinctive privacy and the knowledge that she needed allies. Finally, she nodded and reached for her phone. To her surprise, Jonathan answered on the first ring. Emily, is everything all right? The concern in his voice bolstered her courage. Yes, everything's fine. I'm at the health center for the twins' checkup and, well, their nurse has raised some concerns I think you should hear directly. Would it be possible for you to join us? There was only the briefest pause before he answered. Text me the address! I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Jonathan arrived exactly 20 minutes later. Emily was waiting in the reception area, having retrieved the twins from Mrs. Reynolds, who had driven them over separately. Jonathan entered the building looking every inch the powerful financier in his tailored coat and scarf, drawing curious glances from the staff and patients. His expression softened immediately when he spotted Lucas and Lily in their double stroller. There they are, he said warmly, crouching down to their level. Hello, little ones. Emily was struck, as always, by the genuine affection in his voice when he addressed her children. There was nothing performative about it, nothing calculated. It was the simple joy of a man who liked children, perhaps even missed having them in his life. Thank you for coming, she said as he straightened. I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important. Of course, Jonathan replied, his expression turning serious. What's happening? Sarah, Nurse Wilson, will explain. She's waiting for us. Sarah had reserved a private consultation room, larger than the usual exam rooms to accommodate the stroller and extra visitor. Her professional demeanor was firmly in place as she greeted Jonathan, though Emily caught the appraising look her friend gave her employer. Mr. Huntington, thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm Sarah Wilson, primary care nurse for Lucas and Lily. Jonathan, please, he replied, shaking her hand. Emily indicated there were concerns. Sarah nodded, gesturing for them to sit while she began the twins' standard checkup procedures, weighing, measuring, gentle examination. She worked as she talked, her hands confident and gentle with the babies. Someone claiming to be from Greenwich Social Services came to the center yesterday, asking questions about Emily and the twins. When I asked for proper identification, this person left quickly. Additionally, someone has been calling Dr. Patel, the pediatrician, posing as Emily's former employer, and attempting to spread negative information about her. Jonathan's expression darkened. What kind of negative information? Vague implications that Emily was somehow unstable during her pregnancy, that she might have acquired the twins through questionable means. Sarah's voice was clinical, but her eyes flashed with anger. Complete fabrications, of course. I've known Emily since we were children. I was with her through every step of her pregnancy and delivery. Emily watched as Jonathan absorbed this information, his jaw tightening visibly. You believe this is connected to my wife, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I'm not making any accusations, Sarah replied carefully. I'm simply reporting a pattern of concerning behavior that may put Emily and her children at risk. As their healthcare provider, I'm obligated to address potential threats to their well-being." Jonathan turned to Emily, his expression grim. "I'm so sorry. This is unacceptable." The simple acknowledgement, without defensiveness or deflection, loosened something in Emily's chest. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I can't fight rumors and false accusations. I don't have the resources, but I do," Jonathan said firmly. He turned back to Sarah. "Nurse Wilson, I'd like your professional opinion. Are the twins healthy and well cared for?" Sarah straightened, her professional authority evident in her posture. "Lucas and Lily Stevens are thriving. They're meeting or exceeding all developmental milestones. They're well-nourished, properly clothed, and show all the signs of secure attachment to their mother. Emily's care is exemplary, especially given the challenges of single parenthood." Jonathan nodded, seeming satisfied. "Would you be willing to document that assessment formally and report the incident with the fake social worker to the proper authorities?" "Already done," Sarah confirmed. "And I'll continue to monitor the situation closely." "Thank you." Jonathan turned back to Emily. "We need to address this systematically. First, security. I'm going to have additional cameras installed in the East Wing entrance and surrounding areas. Nothing intrusive, just enough to document who comes and goes." Emily nodded, relieved at his practical approach. "Second," he continued, "documentation. Every unusual call, visit, question we recorded. And third," his expression hardened, "I need to have a very direct conversation with Victoria when she returns from her luncheon." The determination in his voice was both reassuring and alarming. Emily had never wanted to come between husband and wife, regardless of the state of their marriage. "Jonathan, I don't want to cause more problems." "You aren't causing anything," he interrupted gently. "This situation is not of your making, Emily, and I won't allow you or your children to be targeted in my home." Sarah, who had been observing this exchange closely, gave Emily a small nod of approval. The twins, oblivious to the tension in the room, gurgled happily as Sarah completed their checkup. "Everything looks perfect," she announced, lifting Lucas into her arms. "These might be the healthiest babies in Connecticut." Jonathan smiled at this, reaching out hesitantly. "May I?" Sarah passed Lucas to him without hesitation, and Emily felt her heart constrict at the image. Jonathan cradling her son with such careful tenderness, his large hand supporting the baby's head with practiced ease. "You've done this before," Sarah observed. "My sister has 4 children," Jonathan explained. "I was very involved when they were young." A shadow crossed his face. "I always thought I'd have a family of my own someday. Life had other plans." The simple admission revealed more than perhaps he intended, and Emily found herself wondering about the choices and compromises that had shaped his path. Had he given up the dream of children for his career? For Victoria? Or had circumstances simply moved him in a different direction, as they had for so many? The moment was broken by Emily's phone ringing, Mrs. Reynolds checking that everything was all right with the twins. "We should head back," Emily said, after assuring the housekeeper they were fine. Mrs. Reynolds worries. Jonathan handed Lucas back to Sarah, who returned him to the stroller beside his sister. "I have some calls to make from the car. I'll drive back separately and meet you at the house." He paused, his expression serious again. "Emily, I meant what I said. This stops today." After he left, Sarah turned to Emily with raised eyebrows. "Well, he's certainly invested." "It's complicated," Emily sighed, securing the twins in their stroller. "I can see that." Sarah's expression softened. "But for what it's worth, he genuinely seems to care about you and the twins, and he didn't hesitate to believe you or stand up for you." "That almost makes it worse," Emily admitted. "I never wanted to be the reason someone's marriage fails." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "From what you've told me, their marriage was in trouble long before you arrived. You're not responsible for their problems, Em." "Maybe not," Emily conceded, "but I'm definitely a catalyst now." By the time Emily returned to the Huntington estate, the atmosphere had changed palpably. Security staff she rarely saw were visible at the gates and main entrances. Mrs. Reynolds met her at the East Wing door, her expression concerned. "Mr. Huntington has called an emergency staff meeting," she informed Emily, helping with the stroller. "Just the senior household. Staff, you, me, Gregory the groundskeeper, and Chef Michael. In the library as soon as you've settled the twins." Emily felt a flutter of anxiety. Did he say what it's about? Security updates, he said. But there's tension in the air, Emily. Mrs. Huntington returned from her luncheon an hour ago and words were exchanged in the master suite. Loud words. The confrontation Emily had been dreading had apparently already begun. She hurried to settle the twins for their afternoon nap, then made her way to the library, where she found the other staff already assembled. Jonathan stood by the fireplace, his expression grave but controlled. "Thank you all for coming," he began once Emily had taken a seat. "I'll be brief. There have been some security concerns that need addressing. First, we're upgrading the surveillance system around the property perimeter and at all entrances. This is precautionary but important." He turned to Mrs. Reynolds. "I'll need a complete list of all scheduled deliveries, maintenance visits, and other expected guests for the next month. No one, absolutely no one, enters this property without proper verification from now on." The housekeeper nodded, already making notes. "Additionally," Jonathan continued, "there have been inquiries about certain members of our household. Inappropriate, invasive inquiries." His gaze briefly met Emily's before returning to the group. "If anyone approaches any of you with questions about this household or the people in it, you are to report it to me immediately. Do not engage, do not provide information. Is that clear?" The staff murmured their agreement, exchanging confused glances. This level of security was unprecedented at the normally relaxed estate. "Finally," Jonathan said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "it's come to my attention that these inquiries may have originated from someone within our household. I want to be absolutely clear. This behavior will not be tolerated. Anyone found to be undermining the privacy, safety, or reputation of any person under this roof will face immediate consequences, legal and otherwise." The implication hung heavily in the air. Emily kept her eyes on her hands, acutely aware of the sidelong glances from the other staff members. They weren't fools. They'd surely noticed the tension between Victoria and herself, Jonathan's special attention to the twins, the shifting power dynamics in the household. "That's all for now," Jonathan concluded. "Thank you for your discretion and professionalism." As the staff dispersed, Jonathan caught Emily's eye, silently asking her to stay behind. When they were alone, he closed the library door and turned to her with a weary expression. "I've confronted Victoria," he said without preamble. "She denied everything, of course, but I made the consequences absolutely clear. I've also contacted my attorney to prepare restraining orders if necessary." Emily felt a chill at the escalation. "Restraining orders? Jonathan, that seems extreme." "What's extreme is fabricating allegations about a mother's relationship with her children," he replied firmly. "What's extreme is attempting to create a false history to discredit someone." "Victoria crossed a line, Emily, several lines." "What did she say when you confronted her?" Jonathan's expression darkened. "Initially denial, then justification. She claimed she was protecting our home and investigating concerns. When I pressed her with specifics, she broke down, admitted she felt threatened by your presence, by my interest in you and the twins." Emily closed her eyes briefly. "This is exactly what I wanted to avoid." "I know," Jonathan's voice softened, "and I'm sorry you've been caught in the crossfire of our failing marriage. But Victoria's behavior is her responsibility, not yours." He moved closer, hesitating before continuing. "There's something else you should know. Victoria and we've agreed to separate. This situation with you and the twins was the catalyst, but the issues have been building for years. She's going to stay at her parents' place in Manhattan while we work out the details." The news hit Emily like a physical blow. Despite the tension, despite everything that had happened, she had never wanted to be the reason a marriage ended. "Jonathan, This isn't because of you," he interrupted gently. "It's because of us, who we are, what we want, how we've grown apart. Victoria isn't happy here, hasn't been for a long time, and truthfully, neither have I." Emily didn't know what to say. Relief, guilt, and anxiety warred within her. "When is she leaving?" "Tonight. Her driver is coming at 7. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted. "It's for the best, Emily, for everyone." As he said the words, Emily wondered who he was trying to convince, her or himself. Later that evening, Emily watched from her window as Victoria's sleek black car pulled away from the mansion, loaded with luggage. The woman hadn't said goodbye, hadn't acknowledged Emily in any way since their confrontation over the watch. Now she was gone, and the future stretched before them all, uncertain and unwritten. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Checking in. Everyone okay?" "Victoria's left," Emily typed back. "They're separating." There was a long pause before Sarah's response. "Are you okay with that?" Emily stared at the question, unsure how to answer. Was she okay with being the catalyst for a marriage ending? No. Was she relieved that Victoria's campaign against her seemed to be over? Yes. Was she frightened by the possibilities now opening before her? Possibilities involving Jonathan? A future neither of them had planned? "Absolutely. I don't know," she replied honestly. "Everything's happening so fast." "Just be careful," Sarah texted back. "Separated isn't divorced. And Victoria doesn't strike me as someone who gives up easily." Emily gazed down at her sleeping twins, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization. They deserved stability, safety, love. She had come to the Huntington estate seeking precisely those things, never imagining the complications that would ensue. Now, with Victoria gone and Jonathan's feelings for her increasingly clear, Emily stood at a crossroads. The safe, practical choice would be to maintain professional boundaries, perhaps even seek another position once the dust settled. The riskier path, opening herself to Jonathan's affection, allowing herself to hope for something more, beckoned with unexpected allure. As the lights of Victoria's car disappeared down the long driveway, Emily made a promise to herself. Whatever happened next, she would protect her children first. Her dignity second and her heart last of all. The Huntingtons' drama had entangled her, but it wouldn't define her. She had survived worse challenges than this, and she would navigate these troubled waters with the same quiet strength that had carried her through everything else. Little did she know that Victoria, seething in the back seat of her departing car, was already formulating her next move, one that would test Emily's resolve in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. February in Greenwich arrived with bitter cold and swirling snow, but inside the Huntington estate, a cautious warmth was blooming. Victoria had been gone for 3 weeks, her absence transforming the atmosphere of the mansion from one of tension to tentative peace. The twins, now 5 months old, were developing distinct personalities. Lucas serious and observant, Lily bubbly and expressive. Emily had settled into a new routine, one that increasingly included Jonathan. He had begun taking breakfast in the kitchen rather than his study, timing his appearance to coincide with Emily's morning duties. Their conversations, initially centered on household matters, had gradually expanded to include their backgrounds, interests, and perspectives. Emily found herself looking forward to these exchanges, surprised by how easily they connected, despite their vastly different life experiences. "My father was a construction foreman," Emily explained one snowy morning as she prepared the twins' bottles, while Jonathan sipped his coffee. "He taught me that there's no substitute for hard work and honesty. When he lost his leg in an accident at work, he went back to school, got his accounting degree, and started all over at 43. Jonathan listened with genuine interest, his respect evident in his attentiveness. "That kind of resilience is rare. I see it in you too, that determination to build something solid no matter the obstacles." "What about your parents?" Emily asked, settling into a chair with Lucas in her arms while his bottle warmed. "Were they in finance like you?" A shadow crossed Jonathan's face. "My father was. Third-generation investment banker. Yale legacy, the whole pedigree. My mother was primarily decorative, I'm afraid. The perfect corporate wife. They had a very traditional arrangement. He provided, she maintained our social position." "You don't sound like you approved," Emily observed. Jonathan considered this. "I didn't disapprove exactly. It worked for them, in its way. But there was an emptiness to it. My father worked constantly. My mother drank too much, and I was raised primarily by staff." He glanced at Lucas, gently touching the baby's cheek. "I always swore I'd do things differently if I had children." The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Reynolds entering with the day's mail. "Certified letter for you, Mr. Huntington, from Mrs. Huntington's attorneys." Jonathan's expression hardened as he accepted the envelope. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds." After the housekeeper departed, Emily rose, sensing his need for privacy. "I should get Lily from her crib." "No, stay." Jonathan's voice was quiet but firm. This affects you too, I suspect. He opened the envelope and scanned its contents, his jaw tightening visibly. Victoria is contesting our prenuptial agreement. She claims emotional distress and hostile living conditions forced her departure from the marital home. Emily felt her stomach drop. Because of me. Not specifically named, but strongly implied, Jonathan confirmed, continuing to read. She's seeking substantial alimony, ownership of the Manhattan apartment, and, he paused, his expression darkening further, restrictions on inappropriate relationships with household staff during the separation period. The implication was clear. Victoria was watching them, gathering ammunition. I'm so sorry, Emily said quietly, holding Lucas closer. I never wanted to complicate things for you. Jonathan set the letter aside, his expression softening as he looked at her. Emily, my marriage was complicated long before you arrived. Victoria and we reconnected for all the wrong reasons. I was lonely after years of focusing solely on my business. She was... He hesitated, searching for words, seeking something I couldn't give her. Security, perhaps, or validation. You don't have to explain, Emily assured him. I do, though. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes earnest, because I don't want you thinking you're responsible for this situation. Victoria and I were headed for separation regardless. Your arrival simply accelerated the inevitable. Emily nodded, though guilt still nagged at her. Whatever Jonathan said, her presence had clearly been the catalyst for the marriage's final rupture. What will you do? She asked, nodding toward the letter. Fight it, Jonathan replied without hesitation. The prenuptial agreement is solid. Victoria knew what she was signing. As for the rest, he met Emily's gaze directly. I won't allow her to dictate my personal relationships. The implication hung between them, unnamed but increasingly undeniable. Over the past weeks, their connection had deepened beyond employer and employee, beyond even friendship. Emily found herself thinking of Jonathan throughout the day, looking forward to their conversations, noticing the small kindnesses he showed not just to her, but to everyone in his household. His gentle way with the twins made her heart ache with possibilities she'd long ago dismissed. Perhaps I should move to another position, Emily suggested reluctantly. At least until your divorce is settled. It would remove any ammunition she might use against you. Is that what you want? Jonathan asked quietly. Emily looked down at Lucas, now contentedly drinking his bottle, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. No, she admitted. The twins are happy here. She hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm happy here too. Then stay, Jonathan said simply. We'll handle Victoria and her attorneys. I've navigated worse business negotiations than this. His confidence was reassuring, though Emily couldn't completely dismiss her concerns. Victoria had already demonstrated her willingness to play dirty. What else might she attempt if her legal strategy failed? That afternoon, as Emily was folding laundry in the East Wing, her phone rang with an unknown number. Normally she would let such calls go to voicemail, but with Victoria's machinations in mind, she decided to answer. Emily Stevens, a woman's brisk voice inquired. Yes, speaking. This is Margot Winters from Greenwich Academy. I'm calling about your application for the administrative assistant position. Emily frowned in confusion. I'm sorry, but I haven't applied for any position at Greenwich Academy. There was a pause. Oh, that's strange. We received your resume and cover letter last week, expressing interest in our opening. The qualifications matched perfectly. A cold feeling settled in Emily's stomach. I didn't send a resume to your school. Someone must have used my name without authorization. I see, the woman replied, her tone now cautious. Well, that's concerning. We'll certainly investigate this matter. The contact information must have been legitimate, though, as this is the number listed on the application. After extracting a promise that the school would send her a copy of the fraudulent application, Emily ended the call, her mind racing. Someone, almost certainly Victoria, was attempting to create job opportunities for her away from the Huntington estate. The strategy was clever. Rather than directly attacking Emily, Victoria was trying to lure her away with better prospects. The question was, how many other such applications had been submitted in her name? And what else might be happening that she didn't yet know about? Emily called Sarah, who answered on the second ring. Someone's sending out job applications in my name, Emily explained, after exchanging greetings. Greenwich Academy just called about a position I never applied for. Sarah's sigh was audible. Victoria's getting creative. Have you told Jonathan? Not yet. I just found out. Tell him immediately, Sarah advised. Document everything. And Emily? Check your credit report. If she has enough personal information to apply for jobs in your name, she might try other things too. The suggestion sent a new wave of anxiety through Emily. Identity theft hadn't even occurred to her. But Sarah was right. It was a possibility she needed to consider. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Emily knocked on Jonathan's study door. The email from Greenwich Academy forwarded to her phone as evidence. "Come in," he called, looking up from his computer as she entered. His expression immediately softened. "Emily, everything all right?" "Not exactly." She explained about the mysterious job application, showing him the email with her purported resume and cover letter. Jonathan's expression darkened as he read. "This is thorough. Professional language, accurate details about your work history." He looked up, his eyes troubled. "Victoria has more information about you than she should." "That's what worries me," Emily admitted. "How did she get these details? And what else might she do with them?" Jonathan stood pacing behind his desk. "We need to get ahead of this. First, credit monitoring for you. I'll have my financial security team set it up immediately. Second, a formal cease and desist letter to Victoria's attorneys regarding misuse of your personal information." His efficient problem-solving was reassuring, but Emily still felt vulnerable. What if she escalates? Sarah thinks this is just the beginning. "Your friend may be right," Jonathan acknowledged. "Victoria doesn't give up easily. When we first dated years ago, she had difficulty accepting when I ended things. There were calls to my office, unexpected appearances at business functions. Nothing threatening, just persistent." This revelation added a new dimension to Emily's understanding of the situation. "You think she's obsessed with you?" Jonathan looked uncomfortable. "Not me, specifically. More the idea of me, what I represent. Status, security, validation of her worth. Victoria's parents lost most of their fortune when she was in college. She went from debutante to scholarship student practically overnight. It was traumatic for her. That doesn't excuse her behavior," Emily pointed out. "No," Jonathan agreed. "It explains it perhaps, but doesn't justify it." He moved from behind his desk to stand closer to Emily. "I've been thinking about this situation, and I believe we need to consider a more proactive approach." "What do you mean?" "A trap," he said simply. "We give Victoria exactly what she wants, an opportunity to reveal her true intentions, her manipulations. But we control the scenario, gather evidence, and end this once and for all." Emily hesitated, uncertain. "That sounds risky." "Less risky than waiting for her next move," Jonathan countered. "I know Victoria. She's methodical, persistent. She's building a narrative. You as the gold-digging homewrecker, her as the wronged wife. We need to disrupt that narrative before it gains traction." The strategy made sense, though Emily was uncomfortable with the level of confrontation it implied. She had always preferred to resolve conflicts through quiet dignity rather than direct engagement. But Victoria had left her little choice. "What did you have in mind?" she asked finally. Jonathan outlined his plan. A calculated deception designed to draw Victoria out, to make her reveal her hand. It was clever, potentially effective, but required Emily to play a role she wasn't sure she could manage. "I don't know if I can pull this off," she admitted when he finished. "I'm not an actress." "You don't need to be," Jonathan assured her. "You just need to be yourself, with one small but crucial modification to our usual routine." Emily considered the plan, weighing her discomfort against the potential benefits. Victoria's campaign against her was escalating, becoming more sophisticated. If they didn't act, what might come next? False accusations of neglect, manipulated evidence of misconduct? The risks to her reputation, her livelihood, and potentially even her custody of the twins were too great to ignore. "All right," she agreed finally. "Let's do it." Jonathan's relief was evident. "Thank you for trusting me with this, Emily. I promise once Victoria is fully exposed, we can put all of this behind us and move forward." The unspoken question, move forward how exactly, hung between them. Their growing closeness, the unmistakable attraction, the easy comfort they found in each other's company, all existed in a liminal space, neither acknowledged nor denied. Until Jonathan's divorce was finalized, until Victoria's machinations were neutralized, that space couldn't be bridged. Emily returned to the East Wing that night with her mind churning. The plan would be set in motion the following week, giving them time to prepare, to anticipate Victoria's potential responses. It was necessary, she told herself. Protection for her children, her reputation, her future. Yet as she checked on the sleeping twins, their peaceful faces illuminated by the soft glow of the nightlight, Emily couldn't help but wonder if she was crossing a line. Was she becoming like Victoria, willing to engage in deception to get what she wanted? Or was this simply self-defense, the necessary response of a mother protecting her family? The twins offered no answers, only the steady rhythm of their breathing, the innocent trust that mother would make everything right. Emily stroked Lily's soft hair, adjusted Lucas's blanket, and promised them silently that she would do whatever necessary to keep them safe, even if it meant stepping into the unfamiliar territory of confrontation and strategic deception. Across town, in her parents' Manhattan penthouse, Victoria sat at her dressing table, methodically removing her makeup after another exhausting day of meetings with her attorneys. The preliminary divorce proceedings were not going as smoothly as she had hoped. Jonathan's legal team was formidable, the prenuptial agreement frustratingly airtight. Her phone buzzed with a text from her private investigator. New development at the estate. Call when you can. Victoria felt a surge of anticipation. She had hired Thomas Blackwell 2 weeks ago, paying an exorbitant fee for his discretion and efficiency. The former FBI agent had an impressive track record of uncovering evidence for high-profile divorce cases, the kind that made cheating spouses settle quickly and generously. "What do you have?" she demanded when he answered her call. "Huntington has been seen entering the East Wing quarters after hours," Blackwell reported, "staying for extended periods. My source on the household staff confirms the rumor among personnel is that the relationship has progressed." Victoria's grip tightened on her phone. "Photographic evidence?" "Not yet. The security system upgrades have made external surveillance challenging. But I'm working on it." "Work faster," Victoria snapped. "I need proof, not rumors." After ending the call, Victoria stared at her reflection, noting the new lines around her mouth, the slight darkening under her eyes. She was still beautiful. No one could deny that. But the strain of recent months had taken its toll. Jonathan's rejection, his obvious preference for that plain little housekeeper, and her inconvenient children, had shaken Victoria's carefully constructed self-image. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Their reconciliation had been perfectly orchestrated. The chance meeting at the charity gala, the rekindled romance, the elegant wedding featured in town and country. Victoria had calculated every move, rebuilding her life around becoming Mrs. Jonathan Huntington, reclaiming the status and security she'd once taken for granted. And now, a nobody with twin babies was destroying it all. Victoria reached for the folder her assistant had compiled on Emily Stevens. Background information, employment history, financial records, all legally obtained, of course, through various pretexts and connections. The young mother's life was an open book, remarkably free of scandal or secrets. No criminal record, no bankruptcies, not even a parking ticket. Just the ordinary struggle of a working-class girl trying to make her way in the world. The father of the twins remained a mystery, absent from the birth certificates, seemingly vanished from Emily's life. That had been Victoria's first avenue of attack, attempting to create doubt about the children's parentage. But she'd abandoned it when hospital records confirmed Emily's pregnancy and delivery. Victoria flipped through the pages, searching for a weakness, a vulnerability she hadn't yet exploited. The job applications had been a subtle approach, offering Emily a graceful exit, a better opportunity away from the Huntington estate. But the girl hadn't taken the bait, suggesting she had more ambitious plans regarding Jonathan. What would it take to remove Emily Stevens permanently from their lives? What leverage could Victoria find that would be powerful enough to overcome whatever emotional hold this girl had established over Jonathan? A page in the folder caught Victoria's attention. Emily's financial records, modest savings, student loans from her incomplete college education, medical bills from the twins' birth only partially covered by insurance. Vulnerability there, perhaps, but not enough to force her out of Jonathan's orbit. Victoria closed the folder, a new strategy forming in her mind. If she couldn't find existing leverage, perhaps she needed to create it. Something that would make Emily leave voluntarily. Something that would turn Jonathan's affection to disgust. It would require careful planning, precise execution. But Victoria had always excelled at strategy, at identifying exactly what people wanted and what they feared losing most. Emily Stevens wanted security for her children, respectability, a fresh start. Victoria could take all of that away with a single, well-crafted deception. Smiling at her reflection, Victoria reached for her phone to text Blackwell again. She had a new assignment for him, one that would require particular finesse and absolute discretion. By the time she was finished, Emily Stevens would be gone from their lives forever. And Jonathan would return where he belonged, to the wife who had sacrificed everything to reclaim him. The trap was set with meticulous care. Jonathan had arranged for information about a supposed business trip to reach Victoria through seemingly accidental channels, an appointment visible on his shared calendar, travel reservations